Hey guys, Mike with EBR, and this is Lectric XPress 500 ST. It's a practical commuter with a step-through frame and Class 3 speeds, and it's really just built for value, coming in at just $999. So what does that get you these days? Well, from power and range to comfort and components, let's take a deep dive into Lectric XPress 500 ST. All right guys, so the Lectric XPress 500 ST is a Class 3 commuter, as you can see, with a nice step-through frame. Now this bike is not only 2849 certified, but also the battery is 2271 certified. And again, this comes in at a very value-driven price of just $999. It's not every day we see bikes under that $1,000 threshold, so it's nice to see something this well put together at that price. Now, as far as how much it weighs, this bike is advertised as weighing 58 pounds. I did take this one when I got it for testing and threw it up on our scale here, and it weighed 61. And when I took the battery out, that battery was about 7.5 pounds. Now, it comes in two colors and two frame configurations, but they're kind of isolated to that, and I'll explain what I mean. So this is the step-through model and only comes in white. But if you want the high-step version, so one with a crossbar and a higher standover height, that one will only come in black. So if you want a step-through frame, you're getting white, and if you want a high-step frame, you're getting black. So a little bit of variation, but I think that's part of the reason and also part of the way they're able to keep these prices low. Now, some specific numbers for this geometry are an 18-inch standover height, so that's going to make it really easy for those who just want easy on and easy off, or maybe have stability or balance concerns. That's where step-through frames really start to shine. Now, it's got a reach from 19 to 22 inches, and the reason that number varies is because there is an adjustable stem up front. The wheelbase is 44.5 inches, and that's from rear hub to front hub, and you have a minimum and maximum seat height of 33 up to 45 inches, so a full 12 inches to kind of size in what works for you between that and the adjustable stem. Now this frame will fit riders 5'2" all the way up to 6'3", and the max payload of this frame is 330 pounds. That includes you and any extra cargo you might be bringing, because you're able to mount things like racks and fenders. Now when it comes to wheels and tires, they went with a 27.5-inch setup, and those are wrapped in a commuter tire. It's got a slick commuter tread to it, and that is sized at 27.5 by 2.1 inches. These are light rolling, quick rolling, they're very quiet on the road, and there's a little bit of traction and seeping for things you would encounter on pavement, like wet pavement, things like that. No knobbies or anything crazy for off-road riding, but it does get the job done and fits the theme of the commuter really well. Now they say you can run this between 50 and 65 PSI, at least that's what's on the tires here. I've actually been running a bit lower, around 35 to 40, and I find that's a good balance of comfort and still having traction and speed and not feeling like I need to air up more. Now when it comes to fenders and racks, so as you can see, there's no fender or rack on this, but there are several mounting options, which is always nice because then you can kind of kit this bike out the way you need to based on whatever you're doing with it. This could be a recreational ride for you, or it could be your dedicated commuter. And in that case, you have several mounting points. So you've got mounting points in the back here for not only fenders, but a rear rack. They have two bosses here for a cage, another 3 here for some sort of accessory or a dual cage setup, and another mounting point up near the fork so you could mount a front fender. So you can do fenders, racks, and water bottles or tool kits however you see fit. You got plenty of options there. Now when it comes to lighting, they did include a front headlight right there and a rear tail light. Now this does not act as a brake light, and they don't list how bright that is as far as like a lumen or lux rating. I've turned it on even in lower light conditions, and it's enough to get a ride done. It's enough to be seen in traffic, but it's not anything that's gonna blow you away. Now I will say they do have an upgrade option on this bike available. So for an additional $300, you can turn this same bike into a 750 watt version that will have more power, more range, and it will even include an upgraded lighting system that has a whopping 850 lux headlight, which is pretty substantial. Now, when it comes to the heart and soul of an e-bike, that's going to be your motor and battery. And on this bike, they went with a rear hub motor. Now, it's rated nominally at 500 watts, hence the 500 ST model number, but it can peak at up to 1,092 watts and has a pretty respectable 55 Newton meters of torque. Now, that also uses a torque sensor, something surprising to see at this price point. And Lectric has what they call their proprietary programming. They refer to it as Lectric's PWR Plus system. And essentially, that's just some specific programming to make the bike perform not only as natural as it can with the torque sensor feel, but also still provide some great performance. And when we go on the ride quality in just a bit, and I take you guys out on the bike, I think you'll see this bike is peppier and punchier than I expected. In fact, when I looked at the spec sheet and saw there was a 750 and a 500 version, I thought this would just be kind of the slower, more relaxed ride. But with their programming, it's subtle power, but it's definitely more than enough, and definitely more than I've seen on most 500s, or at least it feels that way. Now, when it comes to the battery, there is a 20 amp controller, and the battery itself is a 48 volt, 10.4 amp hour battery, giving you 499.2 total watt hours. Now, this battery is also UL 2271 certified, and it also comes with a key so you can remove it or lock it in place. I'll show you how that works right now. So all electric e-bikes will come with a set of keys, and right here on the side, you have your charging port with a weatherproof kind of cover, and then you simply put the key in on the opposite side here, turn it, and that will drop the battery. And then there's one button you'll just push to fully release it, and that will drop the battery. There's plenty of room here between the tire and frame to kind of just take it out without any issues. Now, again, UL 2271 certified, basically 500 watt hours. And as far as a warranty goes, this and the entire bike has a 1-year warranty. Now, I'll go ahead and put this back, same way I brought it out, but just the opposite order. So I'll put the bottom in first. You'll feel that kind of just slide into place, and then you simply click it up and you're good to go. Now, when it comes to range, they advertise this bike will have up to 60 miles. Now, you guys know, like I know, there's lots of variables and things that can affect the range. So I went ahead and did my own range test on this bike. In PAS1 at the lowest setting, I was able to get 48 miles. And in PAS5 at the highest setting, I was able to get 28 miles. Now, there's probably some reasons for the discrepancies falling short of 60 miles. However, I don't know the exact specifics of why. I can just make my own guesses. So I had around 1,100 feet of elevation change in my range test, and they may be doing theirs on a perfectly flat course or a relatively flat course. In addition to that, I weigh 180 pounds, and I don't know the weight of their rider. So all in all, 6 foot, 180 pounds, I still was able to get essentially 50 miles on a single charge. And for most weekenders or commuters, that's still gonna be enough to even get a few days into work without having to charge it each night. All right, so when it comes to the overall componentry and drivetrain setup, Lectric opted for a 7-speed Shimano drivetrain. Starting in the rear here, you got a Shimano Tourney 7-speed rear derailleur, mated to an 11 to 28 tooth rear cassette. Now up front, you've got a 46 tooth chainring made by Pro Wheel, and it's got a nice built-in chain guard. So if you are commuting to work or to the store, no grease spots or chain marks on your leg, which is always nice. Now the cranks are Lectric branded 170 millimeter alloy cranks, and they're mated to these really cool Lectric flat alloy pedals that have raised studs for traction, reflectors, and a really cool feature where you can quick release remove them. So you can simply just slide the collar back, take the pedal off, and you can do the same thing to put it back. Just some little things on here that are kind of cool you don't expect to see on a bike at this price. Nonetheless, I figured I'd show it to you. Now, when it comes to braking, they did go with hydraulic disc brakes and 180 millimeter rotors. Now, those rotors are 1.8 millimeters thick, and the branding of the brakes is unbranded. So they're 2-piston calipers, standard hydraulic disc brakes. And one thing I found when I ride this is I was expecting them to be fairly generic brakes, and in a sense they are at 2-piston caliper 180 millimeter rotors, but they have a surprising amount of modularity. I don't know where they got them or how they kind of figured this setup out, but I think this brake set kind of punches above its weight class a bit. They feel and perform really well. Now, moving up to the saddle here. So this is a unbranded comfort saddle with spring supports on the bottom. Plenty of cushion here, wide enough to be comfortable on your rides. Nothing fancy, but gets the job done, and I found it to be comfortable on my ride. With a geometry like this, you're sitting upright a lot, and so you're gonna spend a lot of time on your sit bones, and I think the saddle and geometry does a good job overall. Now, moving up front, they also included a suspension fork, which was not something I expected to see at this price. It's TC80 suspension fork with 80 millimeters of travel and 32 millimeter stanchions. Up here on the right, this red tab will lock the fork out. And if you're not in the mood to deal with suspension, or you're doing the type of riding where you don't want that, simply lock it out or unlock it based on whatever you need. Now, moving up here into the cockpit. So starting down here, we do have an adjustable toolless stem, which I think is really sweet. You simply just push up on the lever And that will allow you to not only change the angle of your stem, but also the angle of your bars. So really cool setup there. And when you got it where you want it, you just push it down and lock it in place. So this is something you don't need to bring any extra tools with you. You can do it wherever you are. Now the bar itself is a pretty typical European style or Dutch style cruiser city bar. It's 660 millimeters long and has a nice swept back feel to it. Now on either side, you have lock-on rubber ergonomic grips. And over on this side, you have your Shimano index shifter. Below that is a throttle that I mistook several times for a trigger shifter because of the look and feel. And it's just not as intuitive for me to go up top. But keep in mind, I ride a lot of bikes and I probably have my own muscle memory or biases there. And if this is your only bike, I'm sure you wouldn't notice it after a couple seconds. Now over here, you have your control pad for the display. And on both sides, you have your unbranded hydraulic disc brake levers. Now, when it comes to cable management, they do a good job of tying everything up together. And they eventually do run it into the frame right here behind the headset. But I will say it's a little busy up front, but again, it's kind of a value-driven bike. Now in the center, we've got the electric display, and let's go ahead and take a closer look at the electric display. All right, so this is the home screen, the screen you see when you power on the Express 500. Now, this has your 10 bar battery level. So right now we're at 80%, 2 of the bars are gone. You do have a wattage output that will give you real-time watts that's being used as you're pedaling the bike, which is why it's at 0 now. In the center, you've got your speed in miles per hour. Below that is your PAS level, which will change as you change PAS levels. And below that is your odometer, with the bike having 125 miles at this point. Now, if you just tap the power button, not hold it because that'll power off the bike, but if you tap it, it'll cycle through more data screens. So you have a trip meter, you have your voltage meter, you have your current, you have your timer, and we go back to the odometer. Now the bike will ship as a class 2, limited in both pedal assist and throttle at 20 miles an hour, but it's class 3 capable, and to change that, it's fairly straightforward. You hold the plus and minus on the pad, and that takes you to their advanced settings. Now, full disclosure, these can be confusing. You can get the manual from their website and find out what each P item is, but there's about 20 of them. What we're gonna do is go back in there and go to P8, which is where the speed is. So you tap the power button and it'll cycle through your P here. So we're gonna go up to P8. That's gonna say 45, that's actually in kilometers per hour. And hitting it there to 32 kilometers will take it back down to what we know as 20 miles an hour. So I'll tap that back up, hit enter, and the bike will be saved like that. And then you can cycle out by tapping mode, or excuse me, by holding plus and minus, and that will take you out of the advanced settings. And that's really all there is to it. It's a pretty straightforward display, but at least you have the ability to tweak some of the settings on the back end. Just do yourself a favor and have the manual handy when you do so. Now let's go out on the bike and we'll take you guys along as we ride the bike on the streets and just talk about how it rides and feels out in the real world. All right guys, out here on the Express 500 ST. And when you get on this bike, the geometry is very upright. So it's very typical of a Dutch cruiser, a Dutch city bike, between the Dutch bars and the upright seating position. It's just got that total vibe going. Now I'm 5'11", and they say this fits up to, I think it was 5'2" to 6'3" or 6'4", I can't remember off the top of my head. But I'm kind of right in the middle of that range. I'm even towards the upper end, and for me, it fits just fine. You have plenty of adjustability in the stem and handlebars and the seat post to kind of do what works best for you. Comfort-wise, I'd say it's definitely comfortable. You've got a front suspension fork, you've got slick rolling tires, 27.5 by 2.1, and then this big cushion seat with spring supports on it. There's just really nothing not comfortable about it. The motor on this is shockingly quiet. I know they say they've got their M24 stealth technology, and that sounds cool from a marketing standpoint, but what does that really mean? Now, I don't know from a technical standpoint what they've done, but I can tell you from a audible standpoint, it's a very quiet motor, almost undetectable. Even in PAS 5, punching the throttle, you just don't really hear much. And anytime I'm on an e-bike and I don't hear the motor, I'm always grateful. And speaking of, the motor has the 5 levels of pedal assist. The throttle will take you to 20, and if you want to get to 28, you'll need to use the pedal assist. So let's actually play with that throttle real quick. Kind of just see how long it takes to get going. So we're almost at a stop here, about 2 miles an hour. 3, 2, 1. Had to bump it to PAS 5. And we are off, and quickly at 20 miles an hour. And you feel the motor kind of back off just a bit, bring it back to 19, and then it levels out around 20. But we can keep that going because we have class 3 speeds. And the gearing is nice. It's not ghost pedaling. You can actually use it up here. And there you go, we got 28 miles an hour. I'm gonna slow down, save you guys some wind noise. Speaking of slowing down, the brakes, I mentioned it earlier, but there's a lot of good modularity in these brakes. They have a feel, when they're braking, of a higher end brake, despite the unbranded, just kind of basic 2-piston caliper 180 setup. The levers themselves have good modularity in them, and they feel pretty nice, to be honest. Now, the torque sensor. This torque sensor, you know, torque sensors come in all sorts of styles as far as how they feel. And I'd say this is kind of right where it should be. I've said others in the past undersense and you work harder. I've said some are too punchy and you kind of have these surges. But this one feels pretty natural, and it feels a lot like, to me, like the Ride 1UP current-based system. And I think their PWR technology is very similar to that. But in general, whatever the programming may be, the PWR Plus, it just makes the torque sensor feel like it should. It feels natural. You don't feel anything punching you. You don't feel like you're being pushed like with the cadence sensor. It's just solid. The bike itself, it's going to perform really well as a daily commuter. You're riding to work, you're riding to school, you're riding around town, taking it out on the weekends for relaxing rides, up to 50 miles range. It just kind of checks all those boxes, and then it's got some nice perks like several mounting points to kit it out the way you want, front and rear lighting, and a front suspension fork that kind of smooths out the ride as well. Just a good package for $9.99. But let's not listen to me. Let's go talk to Ben and get his thoughts from a mechanic's perspective. All right, guys, we're here with Ben, our in-house mechanic, and he's going to kind of talk about things he likes and some things he would improve on the Lectric XPress 500. Before we do so, Ben, I just want to say thanks to Feedback Sports once again for supplying us with not only this HD Pro rack, which is aluminum, lightweight, and really durable for these heavier e-bikes, but they have a full lineup of tools we've been using for a while as well. Been real happy with their stuff. If you guys like to tinker on your bikes and you want to check out some tools, I'll leave a link down in the description for Feedback Sports. And Ben, I am going to step out of the frame here, but what are the things you can kind of start off with that you like about the Lectric XPress 500?
All right, thanks, Mike. I'll just touch on a few things. Standout pieces on this one is going to be a through bolt on the front wheel. I really like this, and not is it just a through bolt, which means it's a bigger diameter, but it's also lever actuated, so stronger, beefier, and then also with the lever, really easy to take the front wheel off if ever you have to change the front tire or change a tube, something like that. I always will be a fan of a threadless steer tube on the fork and a threadless stem. That makes it very easy to find new parts for. It's very strong, lighter, and this one is an adjustable stem as well, so you just got to push the lever, open the cam, adjust the handlebar tilt as well as the height of the stem, and it's really beefy too. Not usually, but sometimes when you get this type of a stem, it'll be flexible, really flexy side to side, but this one does seem to be pretty darn tough, so I like that quite a bit. The pedals on this electric bike, they're quick release, so you pull the collar and you can release the pedal right from the crank arm. Now, I used to think that this was just for these pedals, but you can actually unscrew this piece from the crank arm and install a standard 9/16 pedal spindle in there, which means if this pedal ever goes bad, every bike shop in the US will have replacements. So that's a pretty cool option. Great usability, nice aluminum body, steel pins, keeps your feet on the pedals. That's what I like about this bike, other than the very simple design.
Nice, man. And what kind of things would you improve if you redid something like this?
You know, with this bike, I complain about this with other brands or other things too, so it's not just with Lectric, but I really wish they would use a micro adjust seat post. This kind of a seat rail clamp is the same design I had on a 1987 Schwinn Predator, my first BMX bike. It just seems like it's time to jump into the current model year and get something that's easier to adjust and stronger. This frame comes with an aluminum shim to space between the frame and the seat post. That's not such a big deal, but there's only about 3 inches of contact between the seat post and the frame, so it just tends to rock a little bit because of that. I think that they could consider getting a seat post that's the right outer diameter to match the inner diameter of the frame and get away from the shim altogether. In some cases with some electric bikes, if you ride the bike and you go over bumps, potholes, speed bumps, that sort of a thing, Not all of the batteries are tight in the frame. This one in particular, the battery does jostle around and makes noise. I wonder if there's a way just on the inside they can put a rubber bumper or some sort of a shim that'll quiet that down, hold it in place, and just make for a nicer, smoother, quiet ride. That's about all.
All right, cool, man. Ben, once again, thank you very much, and we'll let you kind of get back to your wrench trench.
All right, thank you, Mike.
All right, guys, so there you have it, the Lectric XPress 500 ST. It's really just a value-driven commuter e-bike that I think does a lot of things really well. It might have a 500 watt motor, but it peaks it up to almost 1100 watts and has a respectable 55 Newton meters of torque. I personally got nearly 50 miles of range on a single charge. And really, if you're looking for practicality and versatility, I think this meets both of those. At a $999 price tag, it's a bike from a brand that I don't think you can go wrong if this is the type of bike you're looking for. Now, if I didn't answer any of your questions or if I left something unresolved, drop them down in the comments. I'll do my best to respond to those personally. And until the next review, if you guys haven't done so already, consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you guys out on the trail.